Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?
So, I want to show you guys this book that Flat Earth British was showing on his channel, which is, I think it's a really big key. So here we have an engraving of the beginning alphabets of man. And I really love how it has like these different stories depicting how civilization has is progressing. So keep note of that as I kind of go through these. And all of this is like symbolic, by the way. But what we're going to get to is that most of these languages or alphabets are based off of one, the Phoenicians, which are where it all kind of stems from. So let's go to the next page. And this is what I want to start to notice how this is starting to progress. We're starting to have, like, she's pointing to civilization. You see, this is when we have, looks like Jesus, really. So this is kind of the beginning of when we start to see these little buildings in here and start, you know, because when we think of the Bible, I mean, what kind of buildings are we thinking they were building in biblical time? You know what I mean? Because that's really what this video is about. It's about this strange Victorian architecture that seems to be out of place all over the world. So, you know, why don't we look at some of these old books for some knowledge on the subject, right? So we have the Chaldeans here, right? And I find this like super interesting, right? We have them worshiping or sacrificing to the gods. Why is he showing that here? You know what I mean? We know a lot about this, right? In his history, how they've sacrificed or have gone. The Chaldeans went very pagan in their ways. I think that's what they're kind of trying to symbolize here. So let's move on to the next page. And here we go. Here's where we're getting into some bigger answers. So now we have Syria, and then we also have the Phoenicians. So what is this? You know what I mean? Like, when we think of the Phoenicians, I don't remember anything about dome buildings. I remember hearing that they were very, you know, they sailed all on the coast of Africa to Britain and all that. And what is this about the Egyptians coming right after? Does this have anything to do with the Phoenicians? We don't really see a race depicted, or, you know, we just see this crazy architecture. Let's continue. And also, actually, I want you to start recognizing these strange devices, because this book is filled with antiquitech of like all sorts. Let's go forward. Okay, so we have the Chinese here, Armenian, and the Coptus, which is basically like the Greek and the Egypt blending together. So yeah, let's go ahead and get out of that. And we see this little thing all over the place. We're gonna see these multi-breasted, weird-looking carvings all over the place, and I think this is actually representing Phoenicia. And so what he's saying is that, you know, I'm Alpha and Omega. I'm the beginning and the end, and this is the new. This is the new age. This is the new beginning. This is the new history. That's what this whole book is. It's basically trying to rewrite the past civilization before and trying to make sense of it. That seems what to be. And also, you know, what kind of carving system, printing system is this? You can't really tell in this case, but let's look at some different examples. Like I said, you know, Flat Earth British made some really great points, which I just kind of want to like elaborate upon. It's like, whoever drew this is next level. Like, we got these thousands of different individual people doing their own actions. It honestly kind of reminds me of like 3D and like computer simulation of some sort. I mean, like, you hear of all sorts of types of devices in the past that were automative of some sort. And actually, you know, there's this other book where I'm going to get into that in a second, which will go over that. But back to what I was saying, we have this Victorian-esque type buildings, and what are they doing? They're kind of like coming up here, and it looks like they're destroying it. That's what they're doing. They're getting rid of this. And, you know, what time is this? Well, this is supposed to be the Temple of Solomon. So this is why this book is so important, because when we go to look at what the Temple of Solomon looks like, or how it's depicted in here, it's depicted like some Victorian modern architecture. You know what I mean? Like, is this really, you know, is this really what we were capable of building? You know what I mean? Is this what the Hebrews built? Well, the Bible says that the Phoenicians built this. And like I said in the first video, the Phoenicians are the Irish. So the Irish built this. The Phoenicians is just a cover name. It's just like a little scapegoat. Like, you're like looking at the Phoenicians, you're like following their tracks, and then, you know, you're creating a little history for someone that never really existed. So why wasn't the Gaelic language mentioned in these languages? Do you want to know why? Because this is a Roman book. This is, or supposedly, right? So what I'm thinking is that whoever wrote this, or whoever came out with this information, is, you know, after Tartaria, or what we know as Phoenicia, or the Irish, or whatever you want to call it. So here's the thing. I'm speculating that the Phoenicians had some crazy tech. I found this this website where it's talking about some crazy inventions. Let's see. Other devices created the illusion of a talking statuary, hydraulically powered mechanical music playing automata, the Aeolian harp, which was revived and venerated by the English Romantic poets, and the hearing aid, and the Arca Musarithmica, a primitive mechanical computer that would compose simple random compositions. Okay, so let's just think about this for a second. So they could create, and hold on, I didn't finish that, writing messages in cipher, calculating the date of Easter on any year, and designing fortifications. Like, so what do I mean we, you know, I remember hearing about this in school, right? Like, they used to have computers, and you know, we think about like sundials and stuff like that. It's like, how did these things work? Well, this book right here is showing you like all sorts of a device that creates melodies on its own, a talking statue. I mean, I just feel like we don't understand. And we have these instruments. It seems like this is kind of like some palmistry kind of thing, like integrating it with astrology or something. That's interesting. Then you have these big buildings, and then like some kind of like device that I guess the talking statue comes from. Is this like a telephone of some sort? A study of the ear, astrological references to the ear. So I start to speculate that we have all these engravings. These, you know, this has a specific look to it, right? You have all these different engraving type looks. Let's go back to this. All right, so we have, all right, let's look at this example. You know what I mean? So you can come in here and study this. You can come here and zoom into any single one. And I just wonder, is it possible that maybe they had some type of auto drawing system? I'm not trying to like be like super skeptical. Like, let's just be real. I mean, they had something that could compute musical compositions. You would think if they couldn't do photography, they would think of something, you know. And if they're the ones building all these buildings, then I don't know. These buildings are so great and so magnificent. Like, I would assume that, who knows, maybe they left over some type of printing technology, and the people who came and did this mass murder, I mean, like, this is some crazy stuff here. Why are they doing this? Well, there was some secret knowledge here. And I believe the Jews, right, in Jerusalem, whoever was left over and survived and was remaining in this magnificent temple that was created by the Phoenicians, right? They wanted access to whatever the Hebrews were hiding. And that's what we know as, you know, the Roman Wars. And that's what this is. Some crazy, dark, horrific stuff, right? But why did it happen? Because they didn't know what was going on. All this stuff was left over, all this magnificent architecture. You can see all this kind of like mud stuff. What is all this? It's all ruined. Well, so is this a depiction of Solomon's temple right here? Like, this is what they're saying was in biblical times? And look at what they did to an entire nation. I wonder why, right? There's a lot of confusion. Here we have a depiction of the goddess Diane. And this is from Phoenicia, which obviously the Romans took, but let's look at where it came from. So, let's see. This is because the cult of Artemis, introduced by the Greeks who populated part of the coast at the beginning of the first millennium BC. So who was the one who gave the Greeks the alphabet? I'm going to assume that they also gave them spiritual like concepts and symbolism. So, and then this is a older depiction of what now we just have her depicted as, you know, with a simple tunic, and it's not so graphic. So this is the older depiction of what we have in New York, Statue of Liberty. Okay, and here we have an older depiction of the Statue of Liberty, or Diana. It seems to be some magnetic levitation device of some sort. And you'll see these strange devices all over the place. And I think what I think these are symbols, meaning like these engravings that we all know, whatever artist or whatever created this, you know, this has been kind of manipulated to be now kind of like an arcane symbol, meaning like I don't even know if like the technology actually looked like this, but now, you know, there's another one, the fasces. Let's look at that. Let's see. So here we have these instruments of torture, but I think that this thing right here was some type of sonar device, you could say, some deadly weapon of multiple flutes tied together that could do some serious damage. Do you really think this would like hurt someone? I mean, like, it just seems kind of like doesn't seem like the most efficient way to make an axe, right? Well, that's what I'm trying to say, is I think that this is all symbolism. Somebody like you know, knew their stuff here. So we have the Temple of Solomon that in the Hebrew Bible actually says was created by the Phoenicians because of their crafting abilities. You know what I mean? Which I think is just a cover up. Look at the size of this angel compared to this temple. And that's an angel. You know, we could be like even like a fourth of that. So basically this is massive. So if we zoom in here, we can see the astrological symbolism of the man, the eagle, the ox, and the lion. And this just all goes back to the Irish. So I think they call this the Phoenicians, right? But this is really the Irish created this. Okay, so let's start to make some connections. In the Book of Mormonism, we have this illustration, and I really want to start to tie it together because, you know, I've been looking into the Tartaria conspiracy, right? And then you start to discover that all this strange architecture has this these similarities that keep repeating. And you know, once you know what the Book of Mormonism is about, you could start to look for certain clues, and I think this is one of them. I'm guessing it's called the Liahona. I don't know exactly what this is called. Now, it's the orb and the cross, but I believe this is what it's based off of. And the reason why is because in the Book of Mormonism, a tribe from Jerusalem is trying to escape this like harsh rule or whatever, and basically God is telling them that they need to get out of there. And I have the quote here. Let's read it. So, and it came to pass that as my father arose in the morning and went forth to the tent door, to his great astonishment, he beheld upon the ground a round ball of curious workmanship, and it was of fine brass, and within the ball were 2 spindles, and the one pointed the way whither we should go into the wilderness. So basically what this device is, it's more than a compass. It points to a specific direction, and somehow or another they found this, and it was directing their whole family to the new world. What I'm getting to is that the Mormons knew that there was an ancient civilization that was in the Americas that built amazing structures. And I'm guessing that the Book of Mormonism is a type of propaganda for the new reset after all this stuff happened. So what we have is Salt Lake Temple and all these major Mormon buildings being credited, and you know, saying you know, we have Wikipedia saying that this is actually built by the Mormons, when really I believe it was built by these people and this strange tech that we do not understand. And I'm going to get even further into what this is, but I just want to start this off with this small little clue here, and how I believe that also that this tribe that came from, you know, Jerusalem is actually the Phoenicians. So let's kind of put that into, you know, let's connect the dots there. So the Phoenicians built the Temple of Solomon. So they have some, I mean, and we saw that that looked very modern, correct? So we can assume that their building skills were beyond what we understand the ancient world to be. Is that maybe why we don't know who they are? Is that maybe why we have that scapegoat, right? Where we're trying to understand who the Phoenicians were, but they're no one. They're just some made up name called the fake ones, right? It's really the Irish. And they came to America with this device, trying to escape some crazy dictator, and restarted and built most of the cities that we know today. So that's just the kind of start of it, but I'm going to explain more and get and further proof as we go along. Okay, so I'm building like little like steps for us, you know what I mean? Because like this stuff is not easy. I mean, like type this stuff in. It's not like there's like a step-by-step guide on understanding this. So it's like I'm giving you guys little building blocks, all right? So now that we understand who the Phoenicians were, right? The Irish connection between the Tartars, that's my first video, right? Now we're going to go over crazy architecture that doesn't make sense. And this is one of the earliest maps that you can find on the internet. And it's just so telling on what we've lost, right? So let's remember, Phoenicians created the Temple of Solomon. Okay, so we're gonna see a lot of cities here, and this map is upside down, probably to cause more Tartar confusion, right? So it's completely upside down. Over here we have India, and then this is Russia, and then Europe is over here to the east, which is really, this is the west. So this is west, and then here to the left of the screen is east. So I'm still studying this. I'm still trying to understand this. But for the most part, if you look at this map and just kind of hover around, there's a couple big cities, and we see one in Asia over here. But to me, after looking at this map, the biggest one is over here. And I do think on this map, scale counts, because this must have been some type of older map that was depicting what this continent looked like a long time ago. Because when we come over here to Roma, why don't we see something like that? This is from the 1400s. Bologna, we'll go into that. So it's like, even here. So did this spread out? This is Gallia in the past. So it's like, did this spread out over here to Tartaria? And now we have all these insane buildings, cities. This is the old Rome. This is the old church. This is the old empire. And if they were this big on the coast, you would think that they could easily just sail over to the Americas. Alright, so let's recap. Tartaria becoming a global civilization was a product of the Irish Ari spreading the knowledge to the entire world, becoming known as today's Phoenicians. I believe this Aryan race, or the civilization that followed it, possessed advanced knowledge, and I'm talking knowledge about the nature of reality, self, and magnetism. This explains why there's so many out-of-place buildings and architectures that just don't add up with the explanation of history that we're told. In the Bible, we get references of the Tower of Babel, and that there was only one language among men. Could this be why we were so advanced? Could it be that the people of this time were more passionate, you could say obsessed, with the beauty of the mind, material manifestation? Could this be what the Bible was foreshadowing to in reference to what destroyed these people? When we think of the ancient Irish, we think of the Druids. I think that was right after the flood, and with their knowledge of the magnetism, the world, and the self, we can assume that after generations that the Irish spread into East Asia. I think most of these architectures that I'm about to present have a similar fingerprint, or we can see similarities between all the symbolism and the way that they even built these structures. They all have a similar Victorian type feel. So let's start with the Tower of Babel. I mean, come on, do you think this is just entirely made up? The artist was inspired by something. I mean, it's one of the wonders of the ancient world, and now that we know who built the Temple of Solomon, right? Maybe we can assume that Babel was a point in time before the Irish was fully spread out, right? Where they had one language before it started to become tainted, you could say. And all these people were working together willingly, passionately, to create a tower like no other. You know, and this kind of is ringing some bells towards all these strange architectures and the people who may have built them. I actually never had heard of this, but I found this out on John Levi's channel, really amazing channel. Let's look at this. This is Bologna from Italy in the 1700s, or what it's supposed to be. And I just didn't know that there was skyscraper type medieval buildings, I guess you could say. I just think that this is definitely shows an understanding of architecture that I don't think we really like prescribe to the ancients, especially, you know what I mean, 200, 300 years ago. And now we only have like 20 of these towers left, and this is what it used to look like. Freaking incredible. I'm gonna try to pick up the pace here. There's so many different examples, but let's look at another wonder of the world, the Palace of Versailles. There's this awesome video on the Conspiracy RS channel, and it goes into all sorts of stuff like waste management, and there's like so many different connections between what I'm about to say and all that. But let's just keep it to the architecture. And I also found it really interesting how they were trying to put so much effort to these fountains. You know what I mean? When you look into the story of how these fountains were created, and that like they had to make this machine, and this machine is like an engineering feat that would actually like push the water, all the water that they needed to actually create these mechanisms. I don't know. I think that's way beyond its time from the story that we're told. Sounds a little suspicious to me. Let's move on to the Chicago World Fair. So the story is this was built just for the World Fair. Now, this is something that I did not know about this. Like, you know, like you start to question, you start to really look and do the research, and then you find little details like this in history that you kind of knew about, but then you start to look into it and you're like, yeah, like this doesn't really make sense. So this looks like stone to me. This doesn't look like some kind of like quick metal construction that they built over a period of 10, 15 years. It's just not making sense, you know? And even for the fact that they were lighting all this at this time, you know what I mean, with Tesla's technology, that's pretty amazing. If there's a conspiracy behind that, I don't know. Was that some old tech? I don't know. So another out of place architecture is in Nashville, and I've actually been here, and I did know about this, but I actually, until recently, you know, until I actually started to look into all this stuff, I did think it was how they presented it, meaning like a replica. I don't know. I never really kind of questioned it, but I will tell you this: when I was there, I was pretty amazed at the size of these pillars, and they did look like stone to me. And I remember thinking, like, why would they have a replica? You know what I mean? Because it looks so perfect. You know what I mean? And yeah, I don't want to just buy the official story anymore. I want to ask questions. I'm not trying to state I know what the answer is. We're going to get into construction photos. I know about the construction photos for Nashville, but it's just that there's a specific trend in all those construction photos, and it's just not enough for all these, you know what I mean, all these out of place, unexplainable mysteries. It just doesn't really add up. So, and for, you know, new people who may not really understand exactly what I'm, you know, like hinting towards and all this stuff, is like, what we know is Rome, Greece, and what we've been fed through Britain and America, that whole story is a fabrication. And I'm kind of showing an alternative theory to the world in which the Tartarian Empire, or whatever this great civilization was called, the Phoenicians, the Irish, is responsible for most of the architecture in cities, in like the base structures, and not even that, the foundation and like the roads and everything for Rome, France, Spain, California, New York, America. And in the 18th century, something crazy happened, right? And when we're told that America is founded in the 1776, right? That's really when Tartaria fell, and they just are starting to, you know, get on their feet. Or, you know, there's been like a reset, and they're just now kind of taking over and getting their feet settled. But we'll get to that. So, all right, so it's more than just the architecture. I would say that's just the first clue. The next one is that a lot of these buildings have been repurposed as spiritual buildings, or what we call churches. I'm not sure if that's what they were originally intended for. A lot of these churches have, again, similar patterns. They have these organs that are built into the churches, and it's quite consistent. Like, the architect must have taken sound vibration into consideration when making these temples. There's this artist who studies 3D visual sounds in churches, and what she's found is that in these old churches, there's these fractal-like recordings that she basically finds in the water, and she has a couple different techniques that happens when she's, you know, she makes different sounds in these churches. And my theory is that these churches were built with sound vibration, like, in mind, because they knew that it had an effect on the body and had an effect on their soul. It's like these temples would bounce sound around infinitely, and the people who created these structures knew that that had an effect on the body. I mean, some of these structures are magnificent, you know what I mean? And the fact that they applied a spiritual significance to it, the golden ratio, perfect proportions, and then we got to take into consideration that they took the time to decorate and add all this ornate detail, adding massive sculptures just to glorify its beauty. I mean, this is insane. And we can't even really imagine because so much has been destroyed. I mean, think of the map that I showed you. None of that stuff is there to the same degree. Think of the sculptures from the Chicago Fair. I didn't even know about that. There's this crazy book that I've actually known for a long time, but I'm just now tying it all together with all the knowledge that I'm learning now. And it's Natural Magic by John Baptista. There's so... I mean, like, I can make so many videos off of just this one book alone, and I'm probably going to do that. But one thing specifically that I think ties in here is that there's a specific section where it mentions that, and it actually is talking about Tartaria as well, but it mentions that they used to have this brass device that would emit sound into the city, kind of like a trumpet that would take the wind and turn it into this natural sound vibration. And again, remember what I was saying about the church? I think this affected everybody and their atmosphere and the human body at this time. And I'm saying this because in this specific video of Conspiracy R Us, there's this mystery of why these buildings don't have any bathrooms. And I'm not really going to go into that right now, but this is definitely the start of where I'm going with that conspiracy. But let's continue with just engineering feats that don't make sense for right now. So we went over the machine of Versailles and how the fountains that doesn't really tie together for at the time when they were creating all this, and that it seems like a lot of effort for them to try to like build this crazy machine to be able to just have a display of fountains. But there's also these canals in America and Peru that don't really add up for the time that they were created. We also have railroads, city plans, and streets that were already here, and we kind of just took over and used it as a base. We also have star forts, and this is something that I did not know about until I started to look into this alternative history. This is like all over America, and it's even on the Statue of Liberty. So it's like we're not really told about this stuff, and then when we look into it, this official story doesn't add up. Like in Florida, there's a star fort, and the official story is that when the settlers first came here, they built this this crazy defense fort. Why would they even want to do it in a pentagon, you know what I mean, or a star shape? It's because maybe it was something else, and the settlers came and saw these different structures, used them as defense forts, and now we just have like the remainder of what's been eradicated. I went into the Mormons, but I'm just going to go over it again. I think it's a really key factor when we're learning about this alternative history. It's like the only kind of like source or something that we can kind of just look at and be like, oh wow, like this was put out by some officials. I mean, I still think it was propaganda, but it's kind of crazy that a guy, John Smith, is putting out all this information that is kind of going along with everything that I'm saying. But it's basically about a guy named John Smith who was contacted by an angel named Moroni, and he's told to go dig up these golden plates in a hill nearby. So John spends like 5 years looking for these tablets, and eventually he finds them. And the story that's on these tablets are about a family from Jerusalem who by God were told to venture out into the wilderness or into the new world. Okay, and small tangent, I already went into the little device thing, but all these different architectures that we've been looking at and like if you look at them in Rome too specifically, they'll have these little like devices at the top of the steeples or at the top of, you know, the temple. And with everything that we've been learning about, we know that they've had automated machines. God is telling this family, hey, follow this ball or this device, which seems to be made of some type of mercury metal type of corporation. And also, I find it very interesting that now that device is kind of symbolic for Christianity, the ball and the cross. Why? You know, I have reason to believe that these devices were ether charging devices that created electricity. But here's the thing, it was created from the sun. I mean, think about it. These guys worship the sun, and I think there's so many different reasons why they did. But one of them is that's where they got that's how their technology worked. It worked based off the sun. And that's what that device is. That's what these architectures are. That's why they have all the symbolism integrated into them. Because, and I'm going to slowly show this, but one of the key technologies is this device from Mormonism. So I just wanted to bring that up one more time. Is one of the devices that they use to somehow generate electricity, generate heat, generate something, is this ball device. And it could be that maybe the reason why they're on top of the temples is just to kind of like serve as memory towards the way they got to the new land, or, you know, maybe even to the fact that this device is the base principle of all their technology, meaning it takes sun energy and converts it into electric energy. Okay, so I'm going to go into a theory on how I believe they built such massive stone structures, and I think this is like another technology, and this ties into Coral Castle. I'm gonna have a lot of these links in the description, and this specific engraving I think is a key factor right now. So it tells me that this is some kind of holy, sacred device that had to do with holding water. And I find this really interesting because I was researching Coral Castle and I found that Ed Leedskalnin wrote a bunch of books on magnetism, and he wrote that he found the secret of the ancients. And there's a bunch of YouTube videos on this, but there was this one guy who was talking about how what he believed that Ed was doing is he was charging the water with the sun. He would put the water in a stone basin and charge it, so where the sun would separate the different electrons in the water, changing its magnetic properties. And what he was saying is that if you put this onto a stone, right, like where you would pour this onto a stone and then you emitted a frequency onto this water puddle that you had on the stone, you could, after time, make it like clay to a point where it could be manipulated. So what I think they could do and how they got such huge slabs of rock, I'm not 100% on how they did everything, but I'm just trying to tie in little pieces of the puzzle. I believe that all these different technologies that we see in the Hebrew Bible, the Ark of the Covenant, even this little vase that they seem to all have in the Temple of Solomon, these are different devices that the Phoenicians or the Irish used to build these structures. Okay, and that's why the Romans came in, and that's why they wanted all this stuff, right? So that they could have the power. So these devices, or this one specifically, was made for charging water in from the sun. I mean, let's look at the imagery. Okay, we see a lot of different types of symbolism here. So that's enough of that. Let's go back to what I was talking about with the Mormons, because there is something else that is pretty interesting. So we hear that they leave for the New World, they land in South America, and this is the foundations of how the New World is started. The family is creating a great civilization in America. And I mean, you can see in the illustrations too, like these big stone structures, which is what I find so, weird or telling. But little tangent, John Smith was a Freemason, back to this being propaganda. In the Book of Mormon, it actually says, though, that there was someone else there, meaning that maybe the story that they're telling you of this tribe coming as Jews coming into America, maybe the way they're presenting it might be accurate, but for the most part, it's interesting that in the book they're actually saying that there was another people there. This is what it says. It says, "That I, Jacob, had faith in Christ who should come. He sought much opportunity that he might come unto me. And he was learned that he had a perfect knowledge of the language of the people." So this is the family that just moved into South America, right? Or into the Americas. There's another person that comes in and already knew their language perfectly. So I'm just going to get skeptical here, but I think whoever built these buildings must have been of a bigger stature, or of what we call giants, right? Let's think about those stories from Nevada of Lovelock Cave, right? The red-haired giants. I also find it interesting that there's a lot of stories of lost ships being found in the desert. In my first video, I go over how California used to be an island, and if you look at these maps, you can actually see that there used to be a river that went into this area of Nevada. This makes sense. Maybe these were the Phoenicians, and this story that we hear of Lovelock is just some stupid cover-up, right? Just some stupid thing to make you think that if there was giants, there were these crazy cannibals, right? So it's kind of like alternative media. It's like giving you what you want, right? Just to feud like the entertainment side of the newspaper, right? But at the same time, they're covering something up. So that's what I think that is. So now that we kind of know a little bit more truth about the Mormons, are we really going to believe that in the small time that they settled in America with wagons and oxen in a period of like 20 years, 30, even 40, let's just say 40 years, okay? You're going to tell me that they built all these incredible temples in Utah? I don't believe it. And let's look at the construction photos. You're going to see a constant trend, okay? Constant trend where you're going to see this kind of like scaffolding around the structure already built. I'm calling BS. Like, this is so obvious. And like, these are big events back then. Photography wasn't like something that they just kind of pulled out their camera and took photos, right? Like, they had a plan for this. So notice, right? Like, you type in Salt Lake City, right? To learn the history of Salt Lake City, and the first thing you get is Wikipedia showing you a photo of the construction of Salt Lake Temple. Why would they do that? Why? Because that's the first thing they want you to see. They want you to think that we built that in the 1800s and 1900s, whatever. It doesn't. That is a very old temple. It's a magnificent temple, and guess what? I'm going to assume that it has something to do with the story that John Smith, right? Like, look at this little pretty boy John Smith and his buddies. You really think they built this temple? You're telling me they didn't know. Again, guys, this is BS. They're telling you in the story who built these temples. You just have to be smart enough to put it together, okay? These construction photos are fake. You will never find solid construction photos of them showing you how they create stone dome type architectures, or even doing huge pillars. You're not going to see it, okay? You're going to see these scaffoldings, and maybe they rebuilt the top of like the little steeples, because like what I think they do is they actually take these things down. They've taken them down so many times that they've kind of figured out to an extent how to rebuild those parts, but they definitely have no idea how to create those base stone foundations. And the reason why is because it's based on all this old antiquitech that they still have not figured out how to do, which says a lot. It really does, says so much. All right, I want to give a shout out to Tech Dancer. We're going to move on to the next section, which is mysterious illuminations of the 18th and 19th centuries. I mean, this is a really awesome article because, like, I just think it ties in with everything that we're talking about, okay? I did not know. What's so fascinating about this is the idea that in the past, right? We've gone over all sorts of types of inventions and different technologies that the ancients were thinking about. Let's ask this question. Do we think that eventually the ancients were like, when they were building all these big temples and they were building their big cities, eventually they were like, how can we start to light up the night, right? That's going to be an obvious question that's going to start to be brought up. And so the first thing obviously is going to be fire, right? But we know that that wouldn't work after time, right? So they would have to elevate that idea. And that's what I think this is these illuminations are not fire-based. And they are some kind of invention of, it could be mercury-based. It could be purely some type of device that's producing enough heat to have an illumination. And the way that it's producing this heat is through some type of mechanism that we don't understand, and there's a lot of different depictions of this. I really, really appreciate this blog because it's like all this ties in once you see the bigger picture, you know what I mean? And then you're going to see all these different devices, right, on the top that we're going to see similar trends. Okay, so what I take from this is that they had the ability to light all these structures on a grand scale. And this is not fire. Again, this is not fire. This is some type of glowing chemical reaction that they would use for huge events. And I think there's a reason why we're not told about this. There's a reason. And again, here's something different. Vases. Okay, so these vases would glow to produce light. So again, it's just different ideas in different ways that they thought of creating light. I think it's just another piece of the puzzle on an understanding of who the ancients really were, what they were capable of. I don't think our imagination is really up to par to what the truth and the reality of the situation is. I think we would be astounded and in amazement to truly understand what these ancients were capable of doing. Alright, so now we're going to move on into free energy, and I think this is where I'm going to lose a lot of you guys, but it really isn't that crazy if we just hang on there and honestly just open our minds a little bit, because it's like, why has this been a constant theme throughout history? We've always, constantly have tried to invent some type of mechanism that could, be based on free energy. And you can't even really go and fill a patent out now on any type of free energy device. So that's how ridiculous this is. Okay, so I get it. I know I can see the comments. All right, I get it, but I don't care, because it's like, what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand some really out there, far out stuff. And I think that in order to do that, we have to venture out of our cosmology. We have to venture out of how we perceive reality. And I think one of those things could be free energy, magnetism, perhaps even anti-gravity. I mean, all these concepts could really help explain the mystery of Tartaria, the mystery of the ancients, the mystery of the pyramids. We don't understand how the ancients did some of the things they did. And it's like, remember some of the engravings at the beginning of the video. It's like, we don't imagine biblical days like that. We don't imagine them having these architectural buildings, or at least I didn't. I'm sure some people, once they've done the research, they could tell the obvious, but it's like, I don't think we're taught this in school. The reason is because free energy isn't marketable. Let's forget about the corporation aspect of it, or even trying to generate money from it. I think it goes back to a cosmology, okay? The idea of free energy shows you that there's a God. That's the idea. I mean, think about the people who were generating these types of technology, right? They were very spiritual. They were the basis of all our religions, right? So I'll get back to the free energy, but before we go to that, let's finish up with these out-of-place mansions, elegant fancy art, and strange fireplaces. So what we know as the Gilded Age is just some propaganda for all these Phoenician buildings, right? The traditional story is the economy was booming, and so a bunch of these millionaires started building these mansions all over America, right? Mark Twain wrote about it. Propaganda. Okay. So it says that a lot, if we look online, we'll find that it says these were built in 10 to 20 years. And again, we'll see that there's no construction photos, or we'll just see scaffolding. I think Conspiracy RS has a really great video that explains that whole idea. But I wanted to bring it up because of these fireplaces, right? Or what I think are advanced heating systems of the past, right? So again, let's bring up the Temple of Solomon. So the Phoenicians are building these modern day huge ass temples, okay? So now let's ask a question. It gets cold. How are they going to heat these places up? They don't want to obviously have to build fires in there, right? We've seen a lot of different types of technologies, okay? Now we're getting into something that is going to make a lot of sense now that we know all the things we know. These fireplaces were some type of heating system that worked based off of metal plates and some type of device that is found in all these fireplaces. So the connection here is that these mansions have these huge fireplaces that just don't make sense, right? First of all, they're way too huge, okay? They'll usually have like a painting right where the heat is coming out of the fireplace, right? So that doesn't sound like a good idea. That doesn't make sense. And the whole idea of a chimney is not really smart, right? Like the hot air is going up, leaving the house colder, right? And it's only going to be warm right next to the fire, right? When you look at these buildings, I mean, the living rooms are huge, right? And then you're going to have gatherings of a lot of people. So they needed some other way to heat up this house, and it was not fireplaces. Let me tell you that. It wasn't burning wood, okay? So we'll see these strange devices, okay, that look very similar to what I was showing in the Book of Mormonism, right? The ball and the cross. And like I was saying throughout the video, is that this device is a basis of probably a lot of different types of technologies, but this one specifically, right? It's some type of magnet or some type of advanced device made from copper and mercury where the magnetic properties allow the machine to kind of work on its own. Maybe it takes solar energy, or maybe just the fact of the chemical reaction on its own, it starts to, generate electricity. And when we found these mechanisms, we kind of forgot or lost the way to use them, right? So I don't fully understand just yet how they applied all these different things to stonemasonry, how they lifted the stones, how they did certain feats, but we can speculate, right? It's possible that they could heat up these rooms with these devices, and the way they would do it is that these two positive and negative type devices that were magnetic in nature would generate heat, and that in turn would generate the plates that are found in these fireplaces that would heat up to a point where now we're having hot air that's kind of coming into the room instead of burning wood and chemicals, right? They also integrated these types of devices on top of the buildings. I've said that a couple times. And maybe it's because they could turn these temples into energy charging devices to charge their different, their different inventions. They needed light, they needed heat. What else could they have possibly used? Could they have talking statues, right? Could they have different telephones, different mechanisms for communicating? Well, which brings me back to what I was saying on the Book of Natural Magic, and that there was a device that created sound throughout the city, right? Or had some type of energy that was emitted, so everybody was affected by it, right? And there's this video on Conspiracy RS called Waste Management. It is super relevant right now. But they did not have bathrooms in all these different temples. And I'm just going to start the base for a really awesome video later, but I believe, or I'm speculating, that they figured out a way to magnetize their atmosphere, right? In their cities. And what this did was it had an effect on the human body. Once you've looked into the occult enough, I mean, this makes sense. And so this magnetism was spread throughout the atmosphere, or this energy, right? Or this sound. And I believe that this literally made us like gods, you could say, meaning like we had longer lives. That's what we hear in the Bible, right? The first families, the first civilizations, they had longer lives. What if we didn't poop? I know that sounds freaking crazy. Go watch that waste management video, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. So we're starting to see the bigger picture, right? We have some type of explanation on who may have created these buildings, how they were created, and now it's not so crazy to just talk about Tartaria, right? It's not just some crazy conspiracy where, you know, I've believed my whole life the kind of traditional story that America is teaching through their school systems, meaning like I never questioned where these cities came from. But it's like now with the bigger picture kind of present, we can actually go to this cosmology. We can actually try to understand, whoa, like this actually might have happened. You know what I mean? Like there was a history that was completely different than what we're considering it to be, to what we believe it to be, which it's just not the case. History is not what we believe it to be. There is so much more to look at and so much more to really kind of break down. But I'm going to finish off with saying, or asking the question, what happened, right? Because like in the last video, I was saying that Tartaria was destroyed by some comet or black magic, which is completely possible. But in my next video, I want to talk about a completely alternative view that really makes me question what's to come. You know, it makes me question the nature of consciousness and how we advance as civilization, and whether or not this whole Tartaria destruction was deliberate or not, or was it a part of constant resets that have been happening over and over again throughout human history. I think there's just so much more to this. Maybe Rome did us a favor. That's another video that I'm planning on doing. Maybe we wanted to stop the deluge from happening ever again. Well, we'll find out soon, and we'll soon awaken to the truth, guys. Thanks for watching, and I know this might have gone fast and all over the place, but there's just so much to cover. I'm just trying to lay a foundation. Leave me a comment and let me know if there's anything I should go over. I appreciate all you guys, and until next time.
Let go of everything you think to be true. Relax the mind and ask the question, do I truly understand what this reality is?